Welcome everyone. The webinar will begin shortly and will be recorded. Connect with the campaign for grade level reading on social media. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. Additionally, we've just set up our LinkedIn page, so be sure to follow us at Campaign for GLR. Please use hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learn from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. Once again, we would love to connect. So on Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR. On Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. And on LinkedIn, follow us at Campaign for GLR. Okay, welcome again everyone to today's webinar. My name is Tiera Sanchez and I will be behind the scenes helping to produce this conversation. I have just a few housekeeping details before we get started. First, we would love for you to introduce yourself, so please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city or state, and your organization. When responding, be sure to select both panelists and attendees so that we all know who is here. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but we encourage you to post any questions that you may have during the conversation into the Q&A box. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording, as well as all resources that you see shared as links in the chat, will be compiled and shared in a follow-up email to all webinar registrants. Finally, we'll be posting a brief on-screen evaluation during closing and highly encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. Lastly, before we begin, I would like to call your attention to some of our upcoming GLR Learning Tuesdays webinars. Next week on May 24th, we have a session on elevating educators, investing in teacher professional development for long-term payoff at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. The following week on May 31st, we'll invite you to wrap up the month of May with a session on prioritizing early relational health in tutoring for equitable learning recovery. And in June, we invite you to join us again for more Learning Loss Recovery Challenge series and Crucible of Practice salons. Registration and more information for these sessions will be posted in the chat box now, and we hope you can join us. Joining you now is Sarah Torian, Senior Consultant with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Tiera, and welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us for today's GLR Learning Tuesday session, Innovations in Parent and Educator Supports Critical to Kindergarten Success, another session co-sponsored by our partners at Overdeck Family Foundation. As those of you who might have been following the campaign or a part of the campaign for quite some time probably know, school readiness has been a central pillar of the network and our work since soon after our founding, about more than 10 years ago. We've long known that we cannot wait until a child enters the kindergarten classroom for the first time, or even the pre-K classroom for the first time, to begin to focus on closing the opportunity gaps that children in economically challenged families often experience. And a growing body of research on early brain development has continued to reinforce that recognition. We also recognize and celebrate the power of parents as both their child's first and most important teacher and essential partners in advancing early school success in the early years and in the early grades. So we are incredibly delighted to partner with the Overdeck Family Foundation today to lift up and explore several evidence-based models that are designed to support parents, caregivers, and educators in promoting early brain development, early language development, school readiness, and early school success, and to hear about some incredibly exciting innovations to these models over the past several years. And to begin that conversation, I am incredibly honored to welcome and introduce our moderator for today, Carly Roberts. Carly manages the Overdeck Family Foundation's out-of-school investment portfolios focused on early childhood and informal STEM education. Before joining the foundation in 2014, she coordinated comprehensive services for children and families in Washington, D.C., and held consultative roles in school districts, Head Start Research, Robin Hood Foundation, and the Newark Trust for Education. Welcome, Carly. I'll pass the mic over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. It's so wonderful to have you all here, and I'm just thrilled to be having this conversation with an esteemed group of panelists today. to talk about innovation in parent and educator supports that we know are essential to kindergarten readiness. If there's one thing we know right now as we look across the early childhood landscape, it's that the needs of parents and educators of young children are extremely urgent and constantly evolving as a result of the past 2 years, making these supports more critical than ever. I know I'm preaching to the choir in this group, but we know that kindergarten readiness can impact how successful a child is in high school and beyond, leading to better grades, lower dropout rates, and even better health and lifestyle habits. Research shows that children who enter school with these readiness skills have an 82% chance of mastering basic skills by age 11, compared to a 45% chance for their counterparts who might not have met those benchmarks at school entry. The pandemic, of course, has exacerbated the challenges and barriers that many young children were already facing that prevent a strong start to their academic journeys. We also know that the pandemic has impacted parents and educators in countless ways and had clear ripple effects on our nation's youngest learners. According to one study at Brown University, children born during the pandemic have shown reduced verbal, motor, and cognitive performance compared to those born pre-pandemic. Like our partners at the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, our goal at Overdeck Family Foundation is to provide all children the opportunity to unlock their potential. That's why in our early impact grant-making portfolio, we invest in supporting families and early learning environments in expanding their use of evidence-based practices that are proven to make a difference in the early lives of children. Which brings me to today's conversation and our fantastic panel of nonprofit leaders and their implementation partners. Together, we will discuss key innovations to their program models designed to be responsive to the needs of children, families, and educators. By adapting their evidence-based solutions to be shorter, easier to implement, or even delivered virtually or in a hybrid model, each of these organizations have gained efficiencies and unlocked growth while still achieving strong outcomes. So it is my honor to introduce today's panel. From Springboard Collaborative, we have Keo Cheo-Young, who is the AVP of Academic Research and Design, leading content development and learning design strategy and processes. Sarah Anderson is a program director on the Springboard Learning Accelerator implementation team, working with partners to use Springboard to supercharge their students' reading progress and build community between teachers and families. Sarah also taught English for 8 years before joining Springboard. From Waterford Upstart, we have Jim Lund, who has been working in education for over 35 years, driving programs that help all children learn. That diverse background includes time as a classroom educator, building services and support teams, managing software engineers, and designing experiences that help all people achieve their desired outcome. At Waterford, Jim manages all aspects of the Upstart family journey, from accepted to graduated. Tiera Lindsey is a program coach for Waterford Upstart, having previously worked with children as a substitute teacher, assistant teacher, kindergarten teacher, and interventionist. She is committed to creating a community of learners and helping children progress in all areas of their development, both academic and social emotional. From LENA, we have Liz Pettit, who is the product manager for LENA Grow, where she works to improve children's development by designing and enhancing programs for teachers and families that are user-friendly and impactful. And she has more than 10 years of experience in the field of early childhood education, from instructional and curriculum design, development research, to program or product management. Crystal Skeeter-Davis is the LENA Grow program coordinator for the Virginia Infant and Toddler Specialist Network, which is a program of child development resources. Crystal supports the language development of infants and toddlers by coordinating the efforts of the network's LENA Grow coaches across the Commonwealth of Virginia. And Jamie Morris is an infant and toddler specialist for the Virginia Infant and Toddler Specialist Network as well, working with Crystal at Child Development Resources. Jamie supports early childhood educators by providing individualized consultation, targeted training, and classroom-focused mentoring, and previously worked as a child care center director for more than 20 years. It is wonderful to have you all here. I could say much more about your bios. I tried to keep it brief so that you all can share your work. So to kick things off, starting with Keo and Sarah, I would love to have each of you take a few minutes to give our audience a closer look at the work you do. Please give us a high-level overview of what your program does, where it operates, and who your beneficiaries are, and highlight any data you have on the efficacy of your programs. I'll turn it over to the Springboard team.
Great. So first, thank you to the organizers for inviting Springboard Collaborative to speak at this panel alongside esteemed speakers from LENA, Waterford, and Child Development Resources. As mentioned, my name is Keo Cheo-Young, and I'm joined by Sarah Anderson, one of Springboard's amazing program directors. So what is it that we do at Springboard? Springboard exists to close the literacy gap by closing the gap between home and school, and we do that primarily through capacity building. So we train our educators and we upskill parents to team up to help children reach at grade level by 4th grade. And so to help our children succeed, we take a 3-pronged approach, as you can see in this visual here. We coach pre-K to 3rd grade teachers on everything from, engaging with families as partners. How do we collaborate with families as partners, right? To how to provide phonological awareness and phonics instruction. We also equip our families to support their children at home. And finally, you can see at the very bottom there that we build relationships, which we know are the foundation of growth and change. Building relationships between families and teachers, teachers and children, families and children. Also implied in this visual, we work in all major regions of the United States and in big and small institutions like large school districts to CBOs or community-based organizations, so that we are supporting thousands of children meet reading goals. And also as implied, our beneficiaries are families. They're also educators of all backgrounds and children starting from 48 months. Next slide, I'm going to go through our program models. So what program models do Springboard offer? What is it that we do? We currently offer 2 program models. Our comprehensive program model we call Flagship, and another program model really birthed during COVID called Springboard Learning Accelerator, or SLA. Sarah Anderson is one of our SLA program directors. The biggest difference between the 2 program models is that for Flagship, we really provide a very robust management structure, whereas for SLA, the management structure is less robust. Both program models are essentially what we call learning accelerators, and powered by a 6-part guiding framework that you see here, or sometimes known as like a methodology called FELA, which stands for Family Educator Learning Accelerator. Because these 5 to 10 week accelerators are built on relationships, there's always, if you can kind of like zoom in to step 1, there's always a foundational meeting, making sure that there is time for families and teachers to meet before the program starts. There are steps that involve goal setting. Students are practicing with the adults in their lives, practicing with families, practicing with educators. And at the very end of a session cycle, there's a celebration. So in both program models, we see the FELA, or the Learning Accelerator, sort of embedded as a methodology within these program models. Next slide, please. We're going to take a quick look at our results. And so you can see here, as represented by the data on the bar graph, the impact that our Flagship program model has had on students participating in 2020 when the program model was externally evaluated. You can see that students who participated showed larger improvements in reading scores when compared with students who didn't participate. And if you go to the next slide, you can see that across both program models, you can see the impact that we've had just in comparing to both program models. And by the way, if you're curious, we had collected impact data through tracking improvements from students' reading assessments. And so the headline here is that the results show statistically significant reading growth across both program models, even though SLA is our more recent offering. Next slide, I just want to give you, I won't give a lot of voiceover here, but you can see the results for our SLA program model. And if you look very closely at the bar graph here, you can see the average months of reading growth as demonstrated by students' growth on reading assessments. And in this case, it happened to be a running record. If you want to learn a little bit more about our offerings, I believe, Sarah, if you haven't yet already done it, great. Thank you for dropping the links. If you're curious, about Springboard, the link either to YouTube or Vimeo, it takes you to the same video. It's just on different, video platforms or video sharing platforms. And if you want to learn a little bit more about a methodology, a guiding framework, please click on feelonmethod.org. Sarah Anderson, if you would like to say something, please jump in. But I also know we want to make sure we give time for other speakers as well.
Thank you so much. And I definitely encourage all of you to watch the video. It makes me smile every time. So thank you for sharing. Jim and Tiera, can you tell us a little bit about Waterford Upstart?
So as mentioned earlier, I am Tiera from Waterford. Jim and I work for Waterford, a nonprofit funded generously by philanthropic organizations like Overdeck, Family Foundation. We work in schools, but most of the time we are focused on 4-year-old children who are not served by preschool.
So that just simply means we're in homes across America teaching kids the things they need to know to be prepared for kindergarten. And the cool thing is we make Upstart available to families at no cost. So if you're low income or affluent, rural or urban, children who begin with Waterford Upstart are on a path toward academic success. Next slide, please.
We have teams getting families interested and registered for the program, and we have teams shipping equipment needed for an effective learning experience. The equipment does include laptop, mouse, internet access, workbook, and a progress chart and stickers.
Our adaptive software is really core to the learning. And since we're a research organization, we begin everything with a skills check and end with a summative evaluation.
So I am a program coach. Coaching is really where it's at. I get to talk about reading, math, and science with families. I get to discuss motivational strategies and how important things like routine and rigor are to learning. I check in often with the families just to give them a nudge if they are not meeting the 15 minutes 5 days a week, which is the usage requirement, and I celebrate with them when fidelity is achieved.
Next slide, please. So just a quick overview. We're in 27 states. We've got some new ones coming this summer, which we're really excited about. Most importantly, Waterford Upstart works and our effect size is significant. Studies even show that kids who complete the program retain that significant gain as far as into the 4th grade, which really does help set them up for success. What we like to say is they become curious and confident lifelong learners. Thank you.
But we all are here to talk about the innovation. Our normal 9-month program is condensed to the 3 months, in which response is the summer learning loss and the COVID-19. We call it summer learning path, and it's 13 weeks from the beginning of June to the end of August, which is really condensed.
Hey, Tiera, let's save that for a little bit later.
Okay,
We'll go on to the
not a
next
problem.
group.
Okay.
Yes, that will be the main event, and we will definitely come back to that. Thank you so much, Jim and Tiera. Liz, I'm turning to you now, and Crystal and Jamie, you are on deck as well, because we want to hear about LENA in general, and then Crystal and Jamie from your vantage point at Child Development Resources and how you implement and use LENA in your work. So I'll start with you, Liz.
Awesome. Thank you, Carly. And thank you, Sarah, and the Campaign for Grade Level Learning for grade level reading for having us and hosting this webinar. I feel really lucky to be alongside these organizations who share so many of the key elements that we also have here at LENA. So it's really cool to see these programs lined up side by side. So LENA is a national nonprofit, and we are focused on interactive talk in the earliest years. as a key to better futures for children. So we really focus on birth to 5-year-olds. At our core, we know relationships and interactions matter. And so actually, I'm really glad that today we're joined by Child Development Resources of Virginia, one of our implementing partners who we have a really strong relationship with and we try to interact with consistently. So they've been an invaluable part of our effort to build better futures for children. And I'm really excited for them to share kind of what that looks like from their perspective too. So here at LENA, we know interactive talk, the serve and return exchanges are key for children. They build children's brains. And through years of research, both here at LENA and among our over 400 LENA SP researchers, we've seen a ton of data that proves that early talk significantly impacts the outcomes for children later in life, including 3rd grade reading scores. And to put this research into action, we've designed 3 programs that can be delivered both to parents and to teachers. We know parents and teachers are the key to impacting early childhood. They spend the most time with children and they're experts on their own kids. And so we've built these programs to really meet them where they're at and help them learn more about early talk and how to work it into their daily routines. The program we're going to focus on today is LENA Grow. It's a professional development program for early childhood teachers, and it helps them increase those brain building interactions within their classrooms. We also offer LENA Start and LENA Home, and these programs are focused on coaching parents and families. Next slide. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about what this looks like, and we'll talk about what it looks like in LENA Grow, but this is very similar in LENA Home and LENA Start as well. If you can click, yeah. The first step when you're participating in LENA Grow is to have a LENA day. So children wear a small device that's like a talk pedometer in the classroom, and it counts the number of interactions that are happening between the teacher and the child. If you can click. That data is then turned into easy to read reports that are shared directly and immediately with the teacher. So the teacher gets immediate feedback on that day. And coaches sit with teachers and help them analyze the data and learn new talk strategies to increase talk and really focus on specific children who might need that support. Click. All right, and then teachers set goals in those coaching sessions and they go back into the classroom and put it into practice. And then that cycle happens again over time. And as teachers are learning and putting these goals into practice, they see the results on their next reports. Next slide. All right, and then that just leads to increased interaction overall. So we'll go into kind of the length of this program in a little bit, but essentially it happens either over 10 weeks or 5 weeks. So it's a pretty short duration and we see lasting results in teacher behavior from doing this program. Next slide. Oh yeah, and we also have kindergarten readiness as an outcome down the road for the kids who have participated. Okay, so talking a little bit about our impact. We see impact in a lot of areas, but since we're focusing on LENA Grow today, I want to focus specifically on the impact we see in class scores. So this is a standardized measure of classroom interactive quality that's used by Head Start, Early Head Start, and many states in their QRIS systems. So it's really the gold standard of measuring what the classroom interaction looks like. For programs who have done LENA Grow, we see increases in almost all domains across infant, toddler, and preschool settings. And we have seen this with multiple partners who use the class. I actually used to work at Teachstone on developing programs for the class tool and developing professional development for teachers that focused on increasing these class scores. And I know it's really hard to move the needle. So when we saw these outcomes, it was really exciting to see that this short program could have such a large impact. Next slide. And this just shows some the preschool outcomes that we saw in class. A lot of them were focused on the instructional support domain, which is one of the hardest domains to increase in preschool. And so we're really excited to see those results, especially. And I think now I would love to turn it over to our implementing partners at Child Development Resources, and they can tell you guys what they do and how LENA Grow fits into their work.
Thank you, Liz. Good afternoon, and thank you, Carly and Sarah, for making this discussion possible. I'm the LENA Grow Program Coordinator for the Virginia Infant and Toddler Specialist Network, a program of Child Development Resources. CDR is a comprehensive resource for physicians, teachers, and parents, in fact, for anyone that has a question about an infant or toddler in Williamsburg, James City County, York County, and Poquoson. Next slide. Early intervention is critical. Each year throughout Virginia's historic triangle, CDR serves more than 1,400 children with disabilities, developmental delays, or who are at risk for delay. CDR also leads the Virginia Infant and Toddler Specialist Network. I have the pleasure to work for CDR's Department of Training and Professional Development as part of the network team. Next slide, please. The goal of the network is to increase the knowledge level and skills of those who care for infants and toddlers from birth to 36 months. The network provides coaching, training, technical assistance, and professional development to providers at no cost across the Commonwealth of Virginia. Our team of infant and toddler specialists and mental health consultants use the LENA Grow program in childcare centers and family day homes to increase the skills of early childhood educators and to support increases in language development. Our team has been able to incorporate LENA Grow into new programs that request services, as well as with existing programs. Jamie is one of our fantastic infant and toddler specialists, and she's used LENA Grow in both environments.
As an early childhood educator coach, I use the LENA Grow program for early childhood teachers and in-home care providers. And what it does is it helps teachers learn about patterns of talk in their classrooms, identify strategies that assist in increasing talk and conversational turn taking. And it really does encourage growth and confidence in their practices. The flexibility, easy to follow guides, and numerous resources that LENA Grow provides is very helpful in my work as a coach. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing that insight into your work. And I absolutely encourage everyone listening today to explore the websites and links that we've shared, because this work is very hard to capture in just a few minutes. But I'm excited to hear more about the innovations in this work. It is a surprise to no one on this call that the past 2 years have been incredibly disruptive for our nation's schools and families. And I would really love for each of you to share how you've innovated your program models to meet the evolving needs of parents and caregivers and educators in recent years, and importantly, while maintaining impact. It would be great to understand what observations and trends prompted these shifts for you. And we will start with you, Liz, and then turn to our other two guests. So Liz, how has LENA Grow innovated to meet this moment?
Oh, thanks, Carly. I know that we've seen some pretty significant impacts on vocalization in infants who were born during the pandemic. Those outcomes, I believe, were discussed on a previous webinar that you all hosted. And so that, in addition to a lot of the feedback that we've been hearing just from all of our partners in the field about how difficult and strapped everybody is, have really forced us to think really deeply about what's important in our programs and what can we make easier so that there is less less on the plates of folks like Jamie, who's out there providing crucial services to early childhood educators. How do we make her job easier so she can reach more people and reach them with less effort? And so we've been thinking really deeply about that. And we took some immediate steps in the near term as soon as COVID hit for this reason. We shifted to a virtual model for our parent-focused programs. So LENA Start parents began to meet virtually in their sessions rather than coming in person. Through LENA Home, a lot of home visitors were doing virtual visits, and so we had to figure out how to make sure they could still deliver this important data and program in that context. And with LENA Grow in the childcare setting, we had all kinds of things happening, as I'm sure many of you know, anyone with young kids. Some centers had to close temporarily. Some centers stayed open, but shifted to only caring for essential workers, children. Some centers had to close because of financial issues, because of the precarious state of childcare. And in almost every center, even if they reopened later, there are extreme staffing shortages. Folks are really burned out and overwhelmed. And so we've been hearing all of this feedback throughout the pandemic and trying to really respond to it, both as quickly as we can, but also with thoughtfulness to what we put out there to make sure that we're making it easier with each change that we make. So the, excuse me, the two main things we focused on to really address these challenges were, one, to make it easier. So we examined every element of our 10-week LENA Grow program and thought, where can we make each piece of this even easier? And so one of the biggest changes that we made was shifting to a much shorter sequence. So previously, we've had almost 5 years of data showing that a 10-week sequence with teachers works really well. It has lasting impacts on the conversational turns and the outcomes for the children in those classrooms. And so this was a really big and risky thing to think about doing. We have so much data backing up 10 weeks, but we also were hearing such a strong need from the field for less of a commitment. You know, when you have a potential COVID closure every 4 to 5 weeks, it becomes really hard to commit to a program and consistently do it over 10 weeks. And so that shift, I think, mentally made the commitment to the program a lot easier for a lot of programs, and especially those programs that are really struggling the most, but also could potentially benefit the most from LENA Grow. The other thing that we did was work really hard to focus on how to increase equity with the program. So we know that the impacts of the pandemic have only exacerbated the inequalities and inequities that exist. And so helping teachers see and understand how to change that at a classroom level was really important to us. And so we did a lot of experimenting with revising the reports that we give teachers and how they show the data to make sure that we're focusing on the things that really matter and helping them focus on the children who potentially need the most support. And so we revised a report and tested that report actually with Crystal and team. A number of her coaches tested it to make sure that teachers really could read it and that it had the outcome that we desired. And so all of these changes we believe are helpful in addressing COVID impact, but they're also helpful in scaling generally and in reaching a overburdened childcare sector. So the changes were perhaps spurred by COVID and you know, caused us to move a little bit faster, but I think these were changes that will benefit everyone regardless of the situation. Next slide. So the one thing that, as I said before, I should say, we were really nervous about making the shift to a shorter sequence because of the outcomes. We wanted to make sure that the program was still impacting children at the same or similar levels as it was with 10 weeks. So we actually just went back to the data. We have tons of data of classrooms doing the program for 10 weeks. The fidelity minimum is that they complete a full cycle for at least 8 of those weeks. And we looked at what do turns increases look like over the course of that 10-week sequence. So, you know, at 3 weeks, where are we at? At 4 weeks, where are we at as we climb this mountain? And what we saw, surprisingly, is that the 5-week turns gains, children were most of the way there already. And so teachers were seeing these huge gains in the first 5 weeks and then a smaller but steady gain after that. And so we felt that 5 weeks is enough to get the level of impact that we were seeing before, especially for the children in the most need. So children in lower taught classrooms, even at 5 weeks, will still see 85% of the impact they were seeing at 10 weeks. Children who are in the bottom third of their classroom are still going to see 90% of the impact. So those numbers helped us decide, yes, this is the right move. It's responsive to what teachers and center directors and coaches are telling us. And it's also going to still guarantee those outcomes for kids. Next slide. And then the other thing that we changed is this report. We redesigned it to be simpler to read, and we redesigned these stars, which are sort of little awards for teachers. We redesigned them to really focus on getting all children up to a certain benchmark level of conversation. So you'll see here, this classroom earned 1 star for getting all children up to 5 or more turns per hour. And these benchmarks are based on a national distribution of average turns across classrooms. So 5 is sort of the minimum level we want to see folks at. 15 is about national average. 25 is the national average in family childcare and family day home settings. And then 40 is the sort of optimal talk environment that we've seen produces up to 40 turns, produces significant IQ score differences. So that's really a stretch goal in most early childhood settings because of the ratios. But we do see a lot of classrooms reach that goal, which is really amazing. And so the redesign of this report really started to focus on where's each child at and what can you do to increase talk specifically with that child, and make sure that you are not leaving any children behind as you continue to increase talk in your classroom. And I'll probably let Crystal talk a little bit about what it felt like to test this report a little bit later. But we were fortunate enough to spend some time building this and having her coaches test it, give us feedback, talking with the teachers. And so there was a little bit of time that went into making these changes. We couldn't just turn around and start using this report immediately. We've had to spend about 6 months making sure it works, because when we ship it out, we're going to have to retrain all of our coaches on how to interpret the data. But we think that that is completely worth it in favor of seeing bigger and more equitable gains for kids.
Thanks so much, Liz. I think it's so clear how data has informed every part of this decision, but also the feedback and user experience for the folks doing the work. So turning to Jim now, Waterford's Upstart Summer Learning Path program emerged during the pandemic. So tell us about that and how this new innovation has continued to evolve.
Sure. As Tiera mentioned, our 9-month program, next slide, please. Thank you. Our 9-month program was condensed to 3 months in response, obviously, to summer learning loss and COVID-19. We called it Summer Learning Path, kind of a similar acronym to Springboard. And it's 13 weeks from the beginning of the June to the end of August. So it's really condensed and highly targeted. Liz, I do agree, family commitment in the summer is a challenge. So we too simplified and learned better ways to scale and achieve the results. Next slide, please. Since we couldn't be safely on the ground meeting people, which we do, building those relationships at fairs and events and around communities, we had to create a digital registration process and actually figure out ways to make it more personable. or as personal as possible. Then we had to figure out shipping details. We learned that families were way more transient during the pandemic, so validating the addresses was a key activity that we had to do often. We also had to build asynchronous training to replace our in-person events, and we had to build systems then that would record that training completion so that we knew families had taken the education. And then we also needed to figure out how to deliver our assessment remotely. We usually go into these events and teach the families as the kids are taking an assessment. We had to figure out how to do that remotely. Our new benchmark as well had to account for parental assistance, because we all know mom and dad would never parachute in and help their child. So we had to figure out all kinds of systems around that. The usage changed as well. So we normally do 15-5. We worked with families to increase the usage to 20 minutes, 5 days a week, so that dosage would be there to achieve the needed gains. And instead of graduation ceremonies like we normally do across the nation, we made everything digital with the help of online tools like Zoom. Next slide, please. So how do we do? This past summer, nearly 5,000, that's out of the total 10,000 in SLP, families participated in the Overdeck funded summer learning program. More than 70% of those families were below 200% of the federal poverty level. 88%, or a little over 4,000 of those participating kids, scored kindergarten beginning or greater, which we're thrilled, on the summative evaluation, which to us demonstrates they're ready to flourish in the classroom. At the end of our summer learning path program, 89% of the parents told us they felt we greatly helped prepare their kids for kindergarten. So that's just a quick overview. There are more details in the chat links. We've got some great results, and I hope you get a chance to take a look at it. Carly, back to you.
Thanks so much, Jim. It's been so exciting to watch how this work has evolved and just to see the fantastic results year after year. Keo, turning to you for Springboard Learning Accelerator, another COVID innovation. How did this idea get sparked and what impact has it had?
Yes, you mind going to the next slide? I think there's a slide. Yep. So this is already mentioned, but COVID, has really exacerbated reading gaps across the country. So we had seen a need to design a reading program that took place almost entirely remotely, right? Similar to, LENA and also Waterford. And that is SLA, or Springboard Learning Accelerator. And I don't think I made this clear earlier, but we have a full-time team really dedicated to implementing this program, as well as our flagship program, as well as ensuring that, there are seasonal staff, site program leaders to implement the program. So like many on this call, most, probably all on this call, nearly 100% of our students were learning from home. And so we had to address, yes, the academic concerns, but also Springboard was also simultaneously trying to address concerns about children's social and emotional well-being, right? So we essentially built the SLA program model to work virtually for all stakeholders. Everything from, if you can recall, like the steps of FELA, from building relationships through team building huddles, which is really a derivative of evidence-based home visits, which comes out of PTHV, or the parent-teacher home visit. The first step of the FELA to like how we celebrate our children took place entirely online or over computer. We also leverage our app, and I regret not showing a picture of our app, but our app is called Springboard Connect. It is a web-based app, and we had to redesign it so that families could complete a questionnaire that would, provide, results that could link to reading strategies that they could try at home. And the app also allowed parents to track their children's reading, at home. And so it allowed for those functionalities and some other functionalities as well. Parallel to COVID, I think that most of us on this call know that the early literacy field has also become clearer on what students need to learn as far as reading skills, right? Pre-reading skills and reading skills. So our reading readiness and phonics curriculum was further revised to facilitate more direct, structured, and explicit reading foundational learning experiences, right? We already had a phonics curriculum. We just had to make the scope and sequence even tighter. and make sure that, that teachers were provided with scripts that allowed them to address foundational reading skills. We created decks for teachers so that, again, these skills were being taught, not just phonics skills, but also phonological awareness skills, so that they could be taught virtually. But we also want to provide a space for our children to process the sort of things or events that were not just in their head, but also in their heart. And so in the decks, we made sure that, there were again, opportunities for children to just like process what was happening at the time, right? We also saw many educators who were new to teaching reading at the time. Teacher turnover is real, teacher burnout is real. And so, so these aren't like necessarily challenges. I want to reframe them as like opportunities for us to consider as we continue to redesign SLA so that it works for families, children, but also educators of all backgrounds. And I'm proud to say that the program model can be implemented both like asynchronously, but also synchronously and asynchronously as well. Back to you, Carly.
Thank you. So turning to the implementation perspective, Crystal, Jamie, Tiera, and Sarah, can you tell us a bit about how you've seen the needs of parents and teachers of young children change in the past 2 years? And particularly if you've noticed any differences among specific demographics or subgroups that you've worked with? And in general, how has that affected how you and your team do your work? Crystal and Jamie, let's start with you.
So I think we're all aware that the amount of stress and uncertainty that COVID brought to the early childhood profession over the past 2 years really has been overwhelming. Especially when masks were introduced as a mitigation measure, it created a great deal of worry and uncertainty. I began receiving numerous inquiries about how the use of masks might negatively affect children's language development and also their social emotional development. And I was receiving so many questions from early childhood educators like, how do masks affect children learning to communicate? And is it difficult, if it's difficult to speak with a mask on, will children even understand me? Will relationships suffer? And those are just a couple of the concerns that I was receiving. And there's other mitigation strategies used in programs, such as dropping children off at the entrance of the program and not allowing outside visitors. So this limits the extremely important interactions between parents and staff during greeting and departing times, and between early childhood educators and coaches like myself. In our experience, the challenges or the changes and uncertainty resulted in increased need for clear communication. Flexibility, tools, and resources became obvious. So LENA Grow really addresses these needs as it makes the process fun and it provides immediate feedback and encouragement with easy to understand reports for the care provider. The LENA parent reports also provides the homeschool connection that was limited due to the changing of the procedures. It also gives them helpful tips too, the things to do at home. So as a coach, the resources, the videos that they provide to help me in my coaching, and the flexibility that LENA Grow provides really makes my job easier in supporting the early childhood educators that I work with. You're up next, Crystal.
Well, just in recognizing the needs that Jamie just described, our team directed resources to implementing LENA Grow. LENA was really an intentional response to meet the need for educator support and training, and it fit well with our strength-based approach to coaching. LENA coaches, what that meant for us is that we trained 24 LENA Grow coaches. That's both our infant and toddler specialists and our mental health consultants. And to date, we've served more than 100 children with LENA Grow. We are currently completing our third cohort, which should be wrapping up here soon towards the end of May. We, as Liz mentioned earlier, we participated in the pilot of LENA Grow 3 materials. And eventually, it led to the decision to create a position dedicated to LENA Grow program services. On the next slide, as Jamie mentioned, flexibility was so important, and the need for that flexibility resulted in LENA Grow coaches coaching virtually when access to programs was closed due to COVID, and we were restricted from actually entering childcare centers. Because flexibility is still important, our team continues to offer virtual coaching based on the need of educators.
Thanks so much. Tiera, same question for you.
So within the last past 2 years, it became overwhelming stress because it's like, how can we help these kids during this COVID time? Yes, it definitely changed. Many kids mixed out on education due to school protocols and guidelines where you couldn't come inside the classroom, had to be on Zoom. So with our summer learning program, mom and dad was just having a hard time how they was going to get the child to learn. It's easy to say, oh, mom and dad can teach the child. Not every child works well with mom and dad. So that's where we came into play. And then just academic wise, we wanted to be able to help them with our program. So we had to become flexible. We had to become a listening ear, just because how we work, as I am a program coach, we call them. So you would just hear different stories as, oh, my mom passed the COVID. We have COVID in the house. We're in one room, the kids in another one. So it just really became overall, like I said, stressful. But just how it affected me and my team, we just had to become a listening ear. Because now, after mom and dad has said their mom has passed, you had to show empathy. You had to be flexible. Like, okay, we want to help you overall, every aspect that we can, academic, just there for you. So it definitely did change due to COVID. But overall, SLP is a great summer program for the kids.
Thanks so much for sharing. That empathy is so important. Sarah, can you tell us about what you've been seeing on the implementation side at Springboard? Oh, Sarah, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So as Gal mentioned before, Springboard's program really is half in the classroom and then half at home. So we've always really believed in and relied on family members' ability to be educators in the home. And during the pandemic, I think we all saw that the need for families to fill that role suddenly became way more pronounced, as suddenly parents and grandparents and older siblings were suddenly having to be teachers and kind of fill in that gap for students. But with all of that, like, I think all the old gaps in access and opportunity have just continued to widen, particularly with families that have fewer resources, lack of technology in the home, or maybe fluency in technology, and then especially with non-English speaking families and families with low adult literacy. And the need to prepare for and meet the needs of those families became even more urgent since we rely so heavily on family engagement. And we've seen that the family school relationships in many communities withered during the pandemic, as there were fewer opportunities for families and educators to make those connections and build those relationships. So we've had to adapt a lot. We've had to adapt to maybe offer more low tech options in some cases. For example, when Gao talks about our web-based app Connect, for families that's not the right fit for, we now have like a paper version that's more accessible. We've also had to offer a lot of extra language support, like lots of translations in many languages. And we've brought on staff specifically to help schools connect with families through family outreach and supporting workshops and things like that.
Thank you. So, as we all know, the path to innovation is typically not a straight line as you make mistakes, unlock new discoveries, and make pivots along the way. So I'm curious what barriers or challenges each of your organizations faced when you were developing these new models. And Jim, I'll start with you, and then Keo, Crystal, and Jamie, feel free to come in, or we can move on to the next question as well.
Thank you. So many things were huge learning opportunities, and I'm going to highlight just one that seems so incredibly simple, but it's foundational to learning. So it's this, the laptop. So in the past, we'd have events across the nation and we'd hand these out. And that really drove registration. Again, this closed the gap. And we could capitalize on getting a family really excited about going home, beginning usage, starting Waterford Upstart, and that routine that they developed stuck with them for a while. So with COVID, we did put up a couple tents. We did do a few mass pass outs in the parking lot, but it was much less personal. And we weren't used to doing that. And we wanted to try to make it as personal as possible and help with usage. So most of the laptops for SLP were shipped to homes. That created another just really interesting thing. We ended up finding out that the shelf life on an address was a couple months because families were moving. So where in the past we could ship things, even like packets or workbooks or things like that, manipulatives, now we were getting returns back because families were moving because of the struggles that they were in with COVID. So we actually learned things like validating an address via text message was incredibly effective. So that's one of the lessons we learned and one of the things we did. In the end, it came down to missing one day of a 3-month program totally impacted results. So as simple as getting the shipping right really made a difference. And it's something we're going to continue using methods and techniques we learned in SLP for years to come.
Thanks, that's such an important insight. Go ahead.
So for Springboard, the barrier at the time was time. We built under time constraints and other constraints as well. So although our organization really has been building, piloting different programs, really not building, but piloting different programs since 2016, there were certain parts of the build process to designing a program and also like building a web-based app that I think we had to sacrifice under the circumstances, right, Sarah? And so, for example, I can speak more directly about my experience building a virtual phonics curriculum. We were able to test with a few children and a few families, but if we had more time, I desired testing the scripting of lessons with more children and educators of all backgrounds, right? We also had to build or rebuild technology to work for each one of our stakeholders. So I'm so glad that Sarah mentioned this, but we have to find a way for all of our families to receive reading strategies and for them to log in minutes in absence of technology, right? So how do we do that? And so Sarah mentioned it. We ended up creating a paper version of Springboard Connect called Paper Connect. And this is when, where teachers had to fill in data over phone call with a document in front of them. There were also other constraints and barriers that we, of course, encountered and building and rebuilding along the way. So I'm not sure, Sarah, if you want to speak a little bit more to that.
I think maybe when you talk about constraints, maybe we're talking about equal access to like technology and maybe fluency in technology. Not all of our families were there yet, and also not all of our teachers. We had to be really mindful in our professional development and our ongoing coaching and support of our school partners that, our partners were really ready and comfortable with everything that we were giving them, and especially in the past couple of years where teachers have had just to learn so many new technologies and so many new tools. So it's really been absolutely key to just be listening and soliciting feedback all the time so we can continuously improve for them.
Really helpful, thank you. So maybe on thinking about to you, Liz, and thinking about LENA, One of the main tenets of our funding model here at Overdeck Family Foundation is helping our grantees build evidence to support their ability to communicate their impact to various stakeholders and to raise awareness, visibility, and support for their growth. So when you think about building evidence at your own organizations, and Keo and Jim, I'll turn to you next, what are the key indicators or data points that you're looking for to know that your models are working?
Yeah, thanks, Carly. I think that, you know, at LENA, we're built on data. So we really, really love numbers and hard data. And, you know, we have hundreds of data points coming in every day through the devices that contribute to our ability to really have insights into a lot of minutia of what's going on in classrooms and with parents and children. And so we spend a lot of time leveraging that data and figuring out how we can kind of cut past the noise and figure out what it's telling, what story it's telling us. So, you know, I shared a little bit earlier in terms of how we looked at how the data was changing over the course of the 10-week sequence. That's one kind of data point that we've looked at, is how is the change over time happening? What is causing that change to happen in the design of the program? And we also are always looking for ways to measure how this is impacting children directly. So we also leverage a lot of external measures. We've used the DECA to measure social emotional intelligence and how this has been impacting that specifically. We've referred to the class data in terms of impacts at the classroom level. So lots of data, we love all of that. It serves as our evidence base for how our programs work and why they work. But we've also made a huge effort in the past 2 years to put a lot more focus on making sure that our data is also qualitative. So we have a lot of surveys that we do just to get feedback of how people are feeling about our programs. But we also do a lot of intentional interviewing and shadowing work. So we'll work, you know, hand in hand with a partner, or we'll have a, you know, in-depth conversation or phone call with them about how things are going, really understanding the story behind the data. Because without knowing the perspective of the people in the room, when you look at a LENA report, it's just numbers. You have to understand the story of what happened. So you might see a report with lower data on that day, and it turns out, well, the fire truck came to visit the school and all the kids got really excited and went outside and it was chaos. Of course, that's what happened. So I think we really emphasize that storytelling and collecting that feedback in an objective and thoughtful way from our partners, and factoring that into our decision making. So that's really what pushed us to even consider shortening our sequences. It's really what pushed us to consider making a whole new report and having to retrain everybody on it, because we hear this feedback from our partners, and we want to meet them where they are and make sure what we're giving them is inspiring to them.
That's so important, and I totally agree that data in absence of the context of the story is just not as powerful. Thank you.
Yeah.
What are the indicators that your team typically looks for?
Yeah, so for key indicators, we look at a few things to assess impact. And I'm glad, Liz, you had mentioned quantitative data and qualitative data, because we do consider, of course, both types of data when we're reporting on impact. But we also assess on value. Like, for example, our partners renewing contracts to continue working with us. Do they want to come back? Do they want to continue working with us? Our teachers reporting the model as effective and useful, right? They're often, or our children are the recipients of instruction, right? And so we want to make sure that we channel their feedback through teachers, but also through families as well. And if the models are working for impact, we do look at assessment data, which I sort of alluded to earlier, to see growth or improvements in scores. And also checking to see if like reading behaviors are changing, both quantitatively and qualitatively, right? At our company, we look beyond impact data and we look beyond value to see if the impact data holds true at a larger scale across multiple sites. So how might we scale for impact, and how might we improve our financial modeling for sustainability along the way? So I know there was a visual, we may not show it, but you kind of see in the triangle that the evidence we are collecting sort of build with these three activities, right? And they all form one another. So there's impact, there is scale, we have to test for that, and also, not test for that, build towards that, and build towards sustainability as well. Thank you.
I love that image. It's so clear and all really important pieces. Jim, can you tell us how Waterford approaches building evidence when testing new models like Summer Learning Path?
Yeah, we have numerous tools to evaluate if a child is ready for kindergarten. So thankfully, we could reuse those instruments. We also do third-party studies, and we actually have one planned for this summer's SLP, which will really be fun. Our challenge actually was putting actionable data in the hands of our coaches in this short 3-month period, because they needed that data to help influence their discussions with families. So we ended up building a case system in our CRM, which is Salesforce, that talks to our product. And they would, talk back and forth, and it would allow us to pick up on trends quickly. So a case is created when a child uses the software. And the case tracks U for usage, R for routine, and M for mastery. So those three important characteristics for us were indicators of success, and we've got data to prove that. So we took those three and we placed them on a 4-point rubric. So 4 is great, 1's not so good. So the case label could look something like a U4, R1, M4, or great usage, poor routine, great mastery. And so in that example, a child could be binging on the software rather than having consistent usage each day. So we'd give them a call. So every time one of those indicators changed in that case system, the new case was created. Then the coach could pick up the phone or text and follow up with a family, document resolution, and close. So same data for overall summative, but really we worked hard to put it in the hands of the coaches, and that system now will be used for all programs moving forward.
Fantastic. So there's a lot here. I could talk about this all day, but there are some great questions popping up in the Q&A, and so I want to get to those in just a moment. I'm going to ask one last question, and we will try to be quick on that one so that we can get to some of these great audience questions. And the organizations will also answer some of the questions within the Q&A box. So, the innovations that you all have discussed here have really exciting implications for scalability and cost effectiveness. What advice do you each have for other early childhood organizations that might be looking to make meaningful changes to their own offerings in the next year to meet the needs of parents and educators? I'll start with the LENA team. Liz, Crystal, Jamie, any advice that you want to share?
I can give my perspective, and Crystal and Jamie, I'm sure you all have your own thoughts on this because we all like to dream about what the future can look like. But I think for me, my number one dream in the next 5 years is that our early educators are paid what they deserve and what they are. We value them as. So, I personally, I have a 2.5-year-old in care right now. That's the reason that I can be here on this webinar. And I am so grateful to the teachers that are with my child right now, talking with her and enriching her life. And so, if we can really solve that pay problem, that would be amazing. The other piece of the puzzle, I think, is really thinking about how we think about quality in childcare. I think it's hard to talk about this without also talking about the pay in the equation. It's almost cruel to add more to teachers' plates without giving them the pay that they deserve. And so how do we think about quality, enhancing quality, and measuring quality in a way that is not burdensome on programs? So we have QRIS programs and measurements. We have lots and lots of requirements. Some of them are safety related, and so they're super important, but some of them are really onerous and make it really hard to function as a childcare center. And so I would love to see sort of a reevaluation of that whole system and really stripping away the things that don't matter as much and focusing on the things that do, which is high quality interactions. I think making sure that we bring teachers' voices to that change is super important. So kind of following in the footsteps of K-12, where teachers' voices became the center of change. I'd love to see that also happen in the early childhood setting. I think that can happen at a really grassroots level. So I sometimes tell my coworkers, my dream is that one of our teachers will take the report to city council and hold it up and say, look, I need more resources from 4 to 5 p.m. because we don't have enough teachers in the room to have meaningful conversations with these kids. And that's like nutrition. That's part of how we build their brains. So I think kind of that grassroots effort of using the data to advocate for ourselves is really important and something that I hope to see more of in the future. I'll stop there. I could go on forever on this question.
Well, if I could just mention, one of the things that we share with our programs from LENA is that it's difficult to change or improve upon what you cannot measure. At the network, we could not measure the level of language at our programs without the LENA devices or the talk pedometers that capture conversational terms. Resources are often an issue, and I'd hope to see early childhood programs gain access to the resources and technology that they need to address emerging needs. I don't know if Jamie would like to share.
I just really would like to see an increase in the resources and supports for the mental health and recognition of early childhood providers, early care providers who are doing one of the most important, valuable, difficult jobs of providing care for our youngest learners. And just meeting educators where they are, making sure to seek out, broaden access to tools, resources, organizations, seeking out these tools and resources to meet them where they are and support them where they are. The resources that are flexible and adaptable are really important for to support the individuals who work with young children.
Thank you all so much. I'm looking to the Springboard team and or the Waterford team, if you'd like to jump in on this question. Maybe starting with you, Keo.
Yes, I can jump in. This is Keo, Springboard. We do have a slide. We don't need to project it, but I just want to mention that to the producer. So our stakeholders, again, families, children, teachers, right? They need to find the program model meaningful. They need to find it valuable, right? Period. If the experience isn't perceived as valuable from the start by our stakeholders, there's a really good chance that they won't stay long enough to experience the impact, right? So when building programs or products, build with your families, build with our families, build with our educators, and be sure to design processes that are inclusive of all voices, particularly centering, again, right, the voices of our teachers, our educators, and our families, those who we serve. So for example, a really wonderful innovation and improvement team, they've really been instrumental in coordinating, establishing and coordinating conversations with families and educators through what we call advisory groups. There's a family advisory group. There's also an educator advisory group to ensure that we are deliberately centering the voices of our families and our educators. Also, you'll see it here, be willing to be flexible and pivot. If you're finding that tests in first version of products, you're finding that something isn't quite landing, you might need to pivot or persist, right? Depending on how the initial version of something is being experienced by the educator or by the family or even the child or children. So there's opportunity, try to put first versions of products in front of your educators and in front of your families and children and see how it lands, see how it works. We're also learning, I'm also learning about the importance of staying curious and really not making any assumptions about what our stakeholders need, right? And it's really important as we think about how to maintain impact, how do we make sure that the changes or the tweaks that we're making are being experienced as valuable by everyone who uses the product or the service. Also, we know, and Sarah Anderson, you want to speak to this, that would be great. We know that technology can't replace the relationships that are critical for early learning and language development, right? There needs to be, and I mentioned this earlier, there needs to be trust built between families and educators, and in a lot of instances, rebuilt between families and educators, but also making sure that there's, trust and relationship between the adults and the children as well. And because we know technology isn't or shouldn't be a substitute for quality relationships, I do think that what we could do, and I think we all could do this, is really think about ways to leverage technology so that children are learning through the ways that they are learning, which is through language, through play. And I love that Lena's represented here through meaningful conversations with educators and with families. And so we know what works in early childhood. We know that technology cannot replace that, cannot replace the importance of trust and the importance of relationships. How might we leverage technology? How might we integrate it to support the sort of things that would, sort of like activate or amplify language learning and learning around reading? Sarah, did you want to speak into this space as well?
No, I think you covered it, Gal. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And lastly, turning to Jim and Tiera, anything else that you want to add? And then we'll turn to some of the great questions coming up in the Q&A.
Listen, yeah, my main takeaway, I think, and Tiera kind of mentioned this and maybe is going to continue with it, but is about what success is. And for us, it's working with that family who we believe strongly is the child's best and first teacher. And we've learned that it's about helping them achieve their desired result via the most appropriate path. And what's interesting, during COVID, their path and our path was many times different. And we really needed to listen. So, what happens when a family's in direct conflict with our data or our fidelity model? Or what happens when a family's worried about food or clothing or health? Or, those things are more important than learning the letter P today. So we're fortunate to have people like Tiera who, great coaches who basically can modify our implementation model for each family because they're listening and they're adjusting and they're making it actionable. And then they can quickly use that data and adjust as needed. Tiera, did you want to add anything to that?
Just an example, briefly, as a coach, as Jim mentioned, part of our way we do it is a welcome call. Basically, go over the program, set the standards. So at that point, we point out everything that we expect from you. Just for instance, our usage requirement is 5 days a week for 15 minutes. Okay, mom says, oh, I can't do it. I have multiple kids. I'm here, I'm there. Not a problem. What can you do, mom? I'm here to help you. We're going to come up with a plan. So how it works, normally 2 weeks, I reach out. So we have a platform where we look on, it's called the dashboard that shows the data. So I will reach out, contact mom. Hey, mom, that plan worked. You were able to get on 4 days, 15 minutes. Some days over 15 minutes. So technically you've made that 5 days because you went over some days with the minutes. That's when I celebrate them with fidelity is achieved.
Great example of really meeting folks where they are. That connects to one of the great questions that's coming through the Q&A. This is really about, and actually if everyone wants to turn on their video, we'll bounce around and have 1 or 2 panelists answer each question. even though I know they could all speak volumes about all of these. So how do you keep parents and families engaged throughout your program, especially virtually, knowing that there are moves, there are hardships? How do you incentivize that participation and implementation? I think that was a great example from Waterford.
Okay, with silence, should I jump in?
Go for it.
So listen, our goal, obviously, at Waterford, is to make things, our software, intrinsically motivating. That's our goal. We want kids to use it because they're learning and they feel good about it, and families are involved in that as well. I'm a huge Dan Pink fan, and I believe in intrinsic motivation, but on the other side, we've also learned throwing in a little bit of extrinsic motivation helps. So number one, at the end of the program, for those families that use with fidelity, they get to keep the laptop. So this device helps those kids learn for life. The great coach and the mentoring relationship. If I was coaching you, Carly, you and I would have a discussion weekly. I'd be talking to you about what you're trying to do, what you're achieving, where your child is at, what they're learning. And we build a relationship. And so you're wanting to use because you see the benefit, and we're building that relationship. We also do things like pep rallies, and we send out books and pencils, and we have progress charts and postcards when kids do well and things like that. So certainly we try to focus on the intrinsic motivation, but we've got some other things that we found over time, and we've researched, like how many times do I send this and the call to action is achieved? We keep track of all that because over time, we want to do whatever it takes. But I'll tell you, the secret sauce is the coaches. They're amazing at working with these families and helping them understand the value of a good education.
I believe it. Thanks, Jim. I love those visual aids. Liz, how about you?
Yeah, I have to completely agree with everything Jim just said. I think the key element there is the coach. We have really amazing coaches in LENA Grow who are sensitive to where the teachers are at and what motivates them, and they're trained to really plug into that. So that is a huge value that they bring to the table. The other things that we do, so for our parent group, for our parent programs, we find that having a really engaging facilitator helps, who also is a parent and has experienced the program. So you want someone delivering to you this learning who has also been through a similar situation, has learned from that, and can speak to that realistically. So that is a really important way that we keep families engaged. It was a lot harder in a virtual setting to keep families engaged, both for child care centers and in our parent-facing programs. There is just something about that social capital of showing up physically in a place versus logging into a Zoom call that makes it a little bit more challenging. But we do have a graduation at the end. That's a really big celebration. And much like Waterford, you have to complete a certain number of sessions to participate in that. So that's a big motivator too for families. And then I think for teachers, we think it's really important to make sure they're getting credit for what they're doing in a professional capacity. So we've been spending a lot of time working at the state level, because it's different in every state, to make sure teachers are getting professional development credit for participating in this program. And then that goes towards their licensure or whatever credential they're required to hold in their state. So that is also a really important element for us.
Thanks so much. So looking at the time, I'm having a hard time choosing between a lot of great questions here, but we will try to answer it directly in the Q&A where we can. There's a great question about how to pay for these programs. Are there grants that agencies can use to offset the costs? We'll do a quick lightning round with a few answers on how agencies can cover the cost of these programs.
Well, I'm happy to respond. Child Development Resources is a nonprofit, and the network is actually grant funded. So initially we budgeted for a small pilot with LENA Grow. And then came the pandemic. And we quickly realized that needs were changing. And so we were able to make some adjustments in our budget to address the new need that existed.
And a big congratulations to Crystal's team for winning a grant a couple days ago. So it is ongoing work to keep all of this funded. Yay.
It is a challenge. Thank you, Liz.
I'll just simply add, we've got programs across the nation. Point your browser to the waterford.org website. They're funded by generous donors, and we've got tons of no-cost opportunities across the nation, not only this summer, but going into next year. And there was a question about that matriculation too. We've got a lot of folks who do the summer program and continue into the next school year. And we've got lots of offerings for that as well. So you can check it out on waterford.org.
Okay, Sarah, any thoughts on how organizations can cover the cost of Springboard programs? So as they answer, you'll see a poll just pop up. As mentioned earlier, please share your input so that we can continuously improve these programs.
I guess I can take this one. So this funding can come in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's the institution that raises that money themselves. Sometimes it's money provided by the district. Sometimes it's a grant that maybe we apply for and we're awarded money, and we find the partners that want to work with us. So it can be a big variety. Gao, anything to add there?
Yeah, so I was going to mention philanthropic funds as well. And so we do have a team, dedicated to seeking out funds that are available in the world. And I'm sorry, I was distracted. So I wanted to make a comment to the sort of things that we provide to our families and children. And so I kind of mentioned that in the chat box. All children are eligible to receive external rewards, right? And so whether it's gift cards, tablets, backpack with supplies. And so I just wanted to quickly address the question that was asked earlier.
Thank you. Okay, one last lightning round question in our last few minutes. This is a hard one, but I'd love to hear from our panel. What innovations, big or small, do you hope to see in early childhood within the next 3 to 5 years? Someone can jump in, or I will pick on you.
I'll go. I said it, I touched on it a little bit previously, and it just really, I would love to see more support for the mental health of caregivers and resources that are designed to meet them where they are, not just go to this professional development and everyone gets taught the same way. I really would like to have adaptive approaches to meet the needs of each individual caregiver, because everyone's different.
I can say something. I sort of alluded to it earlier, the importance of co-creating with our families and our educators. And also, I think, and when Sarah Anderson and I were talking about this, right, innovation is all too often conflated with technology. So it is about, I think, again, leveraging technology so that it's not, again, replacing the activities that lead to growth in early childhood. Is really about how do we build or rebuild our technology to sort of support these efforts and activities at home. That's what, personally, that's the sort of innovations that I would like to see.
Jim, Tiera, any thoughts on that last question?
I'll take a shot. Oh, Tiera, go ahead. You first.
No, I'm saying you go ahead. I'm gonna let you cover it.
Sounds good. I think we're going to continue seeing more and more work done remotely. I think while many of us prefer in person, I think the world made us look differently. And I think blended is going to be key for years to come. And I think as we really get smart about using the technology, It'll never replace human interaction, but I think AI is going to be really huge in being able to understand the hurdles kids face every day, not only using our software, but in their social emotional growth. And I think AI is going to be a key component for years to come as we get better at using tools like that as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm giving a big virtual round of applause to our panelists. Thank you for sharing your insights and your innovations. And Sarah, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Huge thank you to our panel today. You guys were fabulous. So many insights, innovations, and such incredible research and evidence behind the work that you're doing to support parents and early learning educators. It's really great work, and thank you so much for joining us to share that. Thank you to Keo Cheo-Young, to Sarah Anderson of Springboard Collaborative, to Jim Lund and Tiera Lindsey of Waterford Upstart, to Liz Pettit of LENA, and also to Crystal Skeeter-Davis and Jamie Morris of Child Development Resources. And then a huge thank you to Carly Roberts and the whole team at Overdeck Family Foundation for all of your help in pulling together this amazing and inspiring panel and pulling together today's conversation. I'd also like to say thank you to all of you who joined us today. I hope that you found it as informative and inspiring as I did, and I hope you'll make plans to join us for future sessions. We've got our slide up with some of our upcoming GLR Learning Tuesdays sessions. Next week, we'll host a session on teacher professional development, looking at 3 evidence-based approaches to that as a smart investment that provides long-term return or long-term payoff right now as districts have some money to invest in something like that. We'll round out the month of May with another smart investment conversation, this time looking at the importance of relationships and early relational health and high dosage tutoring programs. We're still doing some planning for early June, but we do have plans right now for our Crucible of Practice, which will be on June 14th in the 12:30 p.m. Eastern time slot, looking at strategies to inspire and support inspire learning in everyday places that children and families often go. I've dropped some links in for all of those sessions, so I hope you'll check those out and register and make plans to join us. And until then, hope you have a great rest of your day and great rest of your week. Thank you again to our panel. Thank you all.